Hello, everybody, and welcome to the webinar today. My name is Judy Browse, and I'm the Executive Director of NAAEE, and we are so excited to see you here today for our webinar. I love our topic and the lineup, and you're going to be in for a real treat of learning and sharing today. And while I'm talking, I just have a very short intro with more of the kind of the logistics, but is there an epiphany you've had this year about climate change in either your work or your personal life that you want to put in the chat? Of something you've noticed or thought about or did differently, put it in the chat. Just hear from you how you're experiencing what's going on in the world with climate change. So I wanted to mention that climate change is one of NAA's strategic priorities, and we are really excited about this panel and how to better work in communities, because change is happening so quickly, and the way to create that change is by getting involved in community action projects. NAAEE does have a lot of resources on climate change education and climate change education policy, and we will put a link into the chat so that you can see what we have that might help you in your work. We've done a number of surveys and reports. We have an ongoing coalition for climate change education policy. We're working on new guidelines for climate change education and climate justice. So hope that everybody can review kind of the resources that are there and share with us any that we should highlight. And we do have a wonderful lineup today to talk about this webinar, which is In This Together, Connecting with Your Community to Combat the Climate Crisis. And we have this lineup of young speakers, all who have worked with the leader in the field, Marianne Krasny, and I will introduce Marianne in just a minute, but just wanted to say thank you to Fatima, Annalise, Tim, and Cami for being here today. We can't wait to hear your stories and really thrilled that you could all be with us. And for those of you new to our webinars, we try to bring new ideas and thinking to the field, and we appreciate all your suggestions for speakers and topics so that we can all keep learning together. And this is part of our EE Inspire webinars, which is all about sparking innovation in the field of environmental education, and we work with our partners at the Forest Service. And a big thank you to Rachel, who is here today. Rachel Byer is an environmental ed specialist at the Forest Service and just an amazing partner. We work with the Forest Service on so many different things. Rachel, thank you. And thanks to our affiliate co-hosts, we have affiliates across the country who are working with us on so many things related to strengthening environmental education. And if you have any questions or want to join your affiliate, please let us know. Thanks to all of you who are here from our affiliate network. And a big thank you to EPA and E360 Plus, which is our partnership with US EPA and the national training program that is part of the National Environmental Education Act that helps support these webinars as well. I know after the pandemic and 8 million Zoom calls, most of you know how to use Zoom, but some of you use other platforms. So please type questions in the chat throughout. We're going to stay after school for any questions that you have and answer some questions. We have closed captioning and translated captioning, and I'll show you where that is in a minute. And this webinar is being recorded, and we'll get to share that and any of the comments in the chat with all of you. So on your toolbar, you can see where the chat is, and you can see, whoops, sorry about that. You can see how you can open the closed captioning. And we are trying a new system here so that you can actually pick the language that you want your captions in, and let us know how it works for you if you pick something other than English. So really happy about that and hope that that helps everybody better understand. And a big thank you to Anne, who is our Director of Professional Development, and our web manager who is helping us with all these webinars. So Anne, thank you so much for all you do. And now it gives me great pleasure to introduce our panel, and I get to introduce Marianne, who's then going to introduce the rest of the panelists. But I am so honored to introduce Dr. Marianne Krasny. I have been so fortunate to work with Marianne on so many initiatives, and I am constantly amazed by the breadth and depth of her knowledge and talent as an educator, a leader, a mentor, and a conservationist. And she has really been a leader in climate change education. She's a professor at Cornell in the Department of Natural Resources and the Environment, and she also directs the Civic Ecology Lab and has helped mentor so many leaders around the globe through her work. She is also one of the most prolific writers and has recently completed a book entitled In This Together, Connecting with Your Community to Combat the Climate Crisis, which this webinar is all about. That came out in March. Please look at all of her other books and research articles. She has helped us all learn so much more and has been a leader in online learning for national and global partners around the world. She was also the director of EPA's National Environmental Education Training Program before E360 Plus. It was EE Capacity. And Marianne gives back to the community every day through her volunteer work with Climate Action Now, Elders Climate Action, and Climate Reality. Let's give her a warm virtual welcome. And Marianne, thank you for all you do.
Well, thank you, Judy. That was a very, very nice introduction. Really appreciate it. Okay. There we go. All right. Well, yes, thank you, Judy and Anne, who I worked with before, and it was really, really fun. And it's great that you all are continuing the work in DC and across North America and the world. And Judy did mention my book, In This Together, and that I had written it. But I also want to say that inspired by Judy, who makes great use of cartoons, I also found a cartoonist for my book. Her name's Emily Hopkins. She actually used to work for the New Yorker. And so there are a bunch of cartoons throughout the book, and this is one of them. And I'll show a couple others. But basically, the book is really my journey to try to figure out, explore what is my role in the climate crisis. You can see here we have big oil, kind of who has such an outsized role in the climate crisis and tried to convince us as individuals that maybe we should be recycling or not buying straws. I hope you can see the captions. If not, you can move your little window with people in it. So, you know, in light of all this, the big and the powerful and the not so powerful, what is my role? And I started out, probably as a lot of us do, thinking about lifestyle behaviors, things like eating less meat or a plant-rich diet. But I kept thinking I should be doing more to address systems level change. But things like protesting, they just seemed out of reach to me. I live in a very small town of Ithaca. It's about 4.5 hour bus ride to get to New York City. You know, is it worth it to go all the way down there to protest, or to DC, which is even longer? And then we hear about the lawsuits increasingly now, which are fantastic, but like the one in Montana against the state of Montana by youth who are claiming that the state of Montana is not providing them the right to a safe future. And that also, that also seemed really out of reach to me. How would I ever get involved in a lawsuit? Over on the right, you can see a letter that is on the Climate Action Now app. And Cami, later on, one of my co-presenters, will be explaining the app a little bit more. But just as an example that in addition to advocacy and, in addition to activism and lifestyle actions, we can think about advocacy or writing or talking with our representatives to try to convince them to change policy. And as I thought about all these different actions I could be involved in, whether they were lifestyle or advocacy or occasionally activism, I came across the idea that really maybe my role in between something really big and something, you know, just doing something in my daily life would be to expand my impact by engaging my family and friends. So whether it's a lifestyle action or activist or advocacy, how could I engage my family and friends alongside me? And I came across this idea of network climate action, and network refers to social networks in this case. And network climate action is really simple. It has 2 steps. First is taking an effective climate action yourself. And the second one is how do I influence, or how can I use the research on influence to impact others to take that action alongside of me? So the effective actions, I would expect most of you are familiar with Project Drawdown. If you're not, go to drawdown.org and you can find their table of solutions. There's about 84 solutions there. And you can click on scenario 1 or scenario 2, but basically what that does is prioritizes them. So in this table, reducing food waste, plant-rich diets, and family planning and education are among the top most effective ways that we can reduce our climate impact or draw down greenhouse gases. So that's step number 1. I use drawdown to think about different kinds of actions. And step number 2 is how can we scale up our impact through social networks? So at first, when I did this, and I also do this with my students, as you'll see in a minute, I thought, oh, well, we can just be influencers. All we need to do is, I'll cook a delicious plant-rich meal with lots of colors that'll look great, and I'll post it on Facebook back then, or Instagram right now, or who knows what else. And then everybody will want to follow me. Well, that didn't happen for me or my students. It might happen for people like Tabitha Brown, who's an amazing vegan influencer. You can find her on YouTube, or Robert Reich, who talks about economics on YouTube, has zillions of followers, but it wasn't me. So I had to think about something else. Social media wasn't really working. And that's when I came across these 2 books, How Behavior Spreads by Damon Santola. He's at University of Pennsylvania. And Under the Influence by Robert Frank, and he's here at Cornell. So this is one of the examples in Robert Frank's book. It's about solar installation. And what people did was they looked at the distribution of solar panels in a neighborhood. And you can see that those houses with the red dots, they have solar panels on them. What they discovered was that solar panels are not randomly distributed throughout a neighborhood. Actually, they're clustered. So what that means, if I put solar panels on my house, my neighbors are going to see it, and then they're going to be more likely to put solar panels on their own home. So one of the biggest impacts of us putting solar panels on our homes is that we can lead to other people doing the same. He also uses the example of smoking, and the results for smoking are very similar to the results for obesity. So basically, we're more likely to smoke if our friends smoke. But if my friend, so I'm the person in the red, my friend is in gray, and she has another friend not pictured here. Even if she doesn't smoke, but her friend smokes, so a friend of a friend smokes, I'm still more likely to smoke. Same thing with obesity. If a friend of a friend is obese, even if I'm not, if my friend isn't obese, is still somehow creating a norm that obesity is okay, and I'm going to be more likely to smoke or to be obese. So what Robert Frank claims is if I stop smoking, the most important impact I have is not that my health will be better, right? I'll save some money, but that I am influencing other people around me to stop smoking. So I'm going to have a social impact, not just on my own health. This is now going to the work of Damon Santola, and these are different diagrams of social networks. So imagine that each of these round circles is a person, and these lines between the circles are connections between people. If they're, sorry about that, but that's okay. If their ties are short, I'm not sure why this is doing this, but I'll stop touching it so much. Then that means that it's a close tie, which means that I know that person well, I'm communicating with them well often, or seeing them often, doing things with them often. So you can see the person in that red, at the end of that red arrow. That person has 2 friends, one on each side, and then 2 other friends that are a little bit more distant. So they're connected right here to the closest friend, and this friend who's a little more distant by the curved arrow. What's interesting is that their close friend is also friends with their friend, right? So you can imagine if these people were all, they're sort of in a friend network, and if there's a message coming across, they're hearing it not just from maybe one person, but from several people who are then sharing it with the next person. So there's kind of repeated messaging. In a small world network, one of those close ties or several of those close ties have been replaced by weaker ties. And then in the random network, there's mostly weak ties. So people who aren't communicating that much. So let me see how we're doing for time. I think we're running a little late. So I was going to just ask yourself, you don't have to put it in the chat, which of those networks, the more regular network on the left with the close ties, or the more random network where you're connected to more people, but it has weak ties, in which of those networks do you think that behavior will spread more rapidly? And I'm talking about a behavior like changing your diet. That's a difficult behavior to change. So this is Dr. Centola from UPenn, and I'm going to move it up to where he does the simulation.
We've embedded people in social networks. You can see here the left-hand side has that kind of residential structured network, and the right-hand side has a casual contact network. And then we seeded them with behaviors and watch them spread. I'm going to watch these spread simultaneously, and what you see is that in the residential networks, people are adopting in these neighborhoods, and then there's a spillover effect where the behavior spreads to the next neighborhood, the next
So the
neighborhood.
blue dots are those who've
In
adopted
the
behavior.
casual contact network, you can see it sort of spreads all over the network, but it spreads more slowly. And in fact, at the end of this process, you get many more adopters in the residential network than the casual contact network. Now this is striking and really surprising. So it means is that behavior spread really differently than disease does. So the intuition.
Okay. So for those of you who thought it was the regular network, I hope that you understood the stimulation. And if not, I think Anne can share the slides. But in close tie networks, behaviors will spread more rapidly, even though we're communicating with fewer people. And I'm going to just explain this with a little slide here in more detail. So imagine that we're trying to change the behavior of this person in the middle, the person the green arrow is pointing to. And one of her friends is asking her to change her diet. She hasn't changed her diet. Two of her friends are sending that same message. She still hasn't changed her diet. But let's see if there's 3 friends here, all sending the same message. Then she might reach that tipping point where she's actually going to listen to people. She's hearing that message over and over again, and she'll change her diet. Okay, so this slide, again, I just included it because I thought maybe you might want to look at it later. This is a great paper by Claire Bauer et al., about different communication strategies that you can use that won't make people think like you're a jerk, basically, when you're trying to change their behavior, like talking about actions, but not judging their character if they're engaging in climate unfriendly behaviors. And then we also might think of choice architecture, which is basically saying that the easy option or the default option is the right option, or the more climate friendly option, or in this case, the healthier option. So for those of you who are old enough to have watched Homer Simpson, you remember that he loved donuts, and they used to be right here on the counter. But one day, Apu switches out fresh fruit, healthy things for donuts because he thinks Homer will just grab the easy thing, and then he'll be able to influence Homer's healthy eating habits. So lessons learned from social networks and behavior spread is that we need multiple messages from multiple messengers to change complex behaviors. Complex behaviors spread more rapidly in close tie networks, your family and close friends. We can use sensitive communication, choice architecture, and other ways to influence those in our close networks. So just the 2 steps again. And then what I wanted to do is turn it over to 3 students and 1 fellow who I have worked with. And our first student will be talking about food waste. So I'm going to introduce him. This is Tim Jia. He's from Shenzhen, China. He participated in a network climate action in my Climate Solutions senior capstone course. Tim just graduated from Cornell with a degree in environment and sustainability and landscape architecture. He's working now in New Orleans on expansive restoration landscape architecture projects aimed at tackling imminent flooding challenges. In the fall, he's headed to Harvard for his landscape architecture master's. And Tim will talk about his project on food waste. So let me, and if you want me to go to the next slide, Tim, then just let me know.
Yeah, thanks so much, Marianne, for introducing me. Is everybody hearing me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, like Marianne said, I'm used to be a one student over a class last semester. And so there was the thing I'm gonna show you is like what the example of my final project where like Marianne asked us to like choose a topic. It's like something related to like climate change, and then using our like own network, it can be your friend. So I choose my family as like the network, and then I conduct like a sort of like experiment and record everything, and this is come to like a final report. So as you can see here, like a bunch of images on this slideshow. So there's like a 3 columns. So on the leftmost is like you can see the top is at like week 1 to 2. So the top left is the week 1, and the bottom left is the week 2. And then the top middle is the week 3, and bottom middle is the week 4. And then similar, and the top right is the week 5, and the bottom right is the last week, which is the week 6. So it's like about 1.5 months of experiment. And so I kind of like ask my parents, and just like we have like a weekly voice coding and track where the progress, and then ask them to take me the photos of their before and after they finish their meal. And so we keep like the record. And then in order to set up like very significantly like sound experiment, I trying to like set up like a control and experimental group. So in order to like set up the control group, I just decided in the first 2 weeks I just do nothing, and just like let them eat and let them take photo for me. So on the left column you can see this very significant amount of food waste. I think it seems to be like more than half of the food are just like waste. And then I just like thinking, okay, we got to do like some actions. And starting from the week 3 to week 4, which is the medium column, I starting to do like more of like a persuasion. So I'll prepare like some my knowledge, what I learned from that class, and then doing like a short presentation to my family weekly. And then the situation like started to change, and you can see there's a bunch of like a different strategy I use in the bottom of the text. So the first one is like sharing the knowledge and why and how to reduce the food waste, and just telling them to how to do it and what the reason is. And then also for my younger sister, she's just graduated from the elementary school this year, I use like the means of like social media. So Marianne, if you click the link on the bottom left, I actually have the link of like one of the example. It's from the TikTok in China. So it's like a short video. It's only about like 30 seconds. So if it asks you to like log in the account, just click the cross arrow. Yeah, on a yeah. And so this is like a
Is that
yeah.
what you want me to do?
Yeah, you can just play it and I will expand it
把这
later.
个花卷也打一打，
这萝卜我估计下午应该它就出水，再吃两
那这锅应该也是没办法。
Yeah, so it's like a show in China. It's like a TV show. So they invited like a bunch of like celebrities, and they ask them to go to like the rural area and experience the farm life. And so there's like I make like a clip of it, or like they're actually saving their food and reducing the food waste. So I was reposting this to my sister and just pursue her to reduce food waste. Yeah, and then going back to the slides.
哥，你把那个拿过来，把
Yeah.
肉挑起来。
好，聪明。
I'm not sure.
汤可能应该没盖子。
Okay, Jim, this is obviously beyond my technical capabilities.
可惜。
Can you just forward, go to the next slide, Marianne?
Yeah, I think there's probably too many tabs. Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm.
I think it's this.
Yeah.
I think I might have to reshare.
Mhm.
Oh, here we
Oh.
are.
Nice. So that was like everything I showed is like on the middle column. That was like the second stage. So the food waste kind of like reduced for a bit. It's like from almost half of the total of the food waste reduced down to like 30-40%. And then on the rightmost column, it's like you see most significant change happened throughout my experiment, where the food waste reduced from like 30-40% down to 0 to 10%. So what happened is this, in like the closing, close to the closing of the experiment, I had like the one of like the final voice call with my mom, because she could make the meal most of the time. I asked her mom, like, what do you think, like, the biggest reason for the food waste. And she said it's probably because my dad sometimes decide not to go back to home and have meal with her, and so but she still prepared his meal. And so I asked, oh, so what about this? Like make some like choice architecture. So you can do like two things. So first, like, give my dad a call every day before he came back to home and to see if he want to eat at home. So you can decide like how much food you want to prepare. And the second thing is you can use like the smaller plates when you just, cook for yourself. Like don't use like a bunch of like pots and, plates, just like cook your own meal in like one plate. If you couldn't finish them, just like, put it in the container and put it back in the refrigerator. That's where we reach to the final stage. As you can say, a huge improvement. I think the food waste was significantly reduced. And if we go to the next slide. Yes, and myself was also like taking part of this experiment. And at the beginning, I took like 2-3 plates every time because it's like the buffet style of the college dining hall. And then I decided like, okay, I just like take 1 plate at a time. And in the final stage, I just like, if I don't really feel like very hungry, I wouldn't like go to dining hall. I'd probably just go to cafe and just get a bowl of food and like finish them all. And so there's also a very improvement happened myself. And yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
That was great. And I really like the story about your father, eating out after dinner with colleagues.
Yeah.
And the simple change you make was just asking him to talk to your mom before he came home to let her know what he was doing that day.
Exactly.
Okay, so thanks so much, Tim. So now we're going to go to Dr. Fatima Delgado. And I first met Fatima, who is from Ecuador, when she was a fellow in our Cornell Climate Online Fellows program. I think that was in 2019. And she also was asked to do a network climate action as part of the fellows program. And I really liked her project. She invited her fellow PhD students, she was a grad student in Barcelona at the time, to come over for sustainable meals. And then in kind of a spillover behavior, she went further and developed a sustainable enterprise called Sustainable Tapas. So Fatima is now actually a professor at Delft University in the Netherlands, and she teaches sustainable enterprise and other topics. So with that, I'll turn it over to Fatima.
Thank you, Marianne, and thank you for this really nice introduction. And yes, as you mentioned before, according to the Drawdown Project, plant-rich diets can be considered as a top climate solution to reduce almost 103 gigatons of CO2 by 2050. And that's how in that time, 2019, I used the Drawdown Project as an inspiration to create Sustainable Tapas. Can we go to the next? Yeah, thank you so much. And actually, Sustainable Tapas is a grassroots innovation or initiative that starts in that time, and which was really nice. That was born in 2019 as a part of the network Climate Action Fellowship that you led. And you can see here one of the flyers that we used in that time to promote our events. And from the first moment, you can see there was we were very consistent with the message. We had around 5 events among my closed, strong tie network regarding not only my peers for my PhD, but I will elaborate on more on that later. But what you can see in the flyer is like we were very consistent with the message that was important for us. And I apply not only the social mobilization or social marketing strategies, but also considering the cultural and social aspects of my network, which according to research, leads to less barriers and led to more open community base to those who are transitioning change in their diets. And the message was clear, like, what if we change a single habit to take care of our planet? And our experience consisted of different events. We had scientific awareness and education on climate change, but also we had food tasting events in the same event, but including seasonal, local, and also gastronomy legacy recipes that are more important for our network. And not only that, we also were assessing the data in terms of the behavior patterns the participants were having during the timing that they were participating in this climate action network. So maybe we can move forward to the next slide and take a look on a video that we prepared in that time to inform more about what is Sustainable Tapas.
Mhm.
Marianne, I don't know, I thought something happened with the background noise. I don't know if, or the background music. It's okay, we can continue. So yes, that was Sustainable Tapas, food, action, a community, which were our values in that time. And this happened during 2019 and 2020. We can move forward to the next slide. And what we were applying, these are some of the outcomes that happened in our network. But how we get to that point, we actually apply social network strategies that has this spillover effect that were implemented during that timeline, from social mobilization strategies translated not only into the events or how we were promoting new behaviors, but also into the branding and the storytelling of our climate action project. We also implemented social marketing strategies and social influence strategies, and they were all applied to the strong ties among my fellow and peers during my PhD journey in Barcelona, but also through my friends network in this city of Spain, which if I remember correctly, 80% were international. And then by going to the last slide, I can explain a little bit further that Sustainable Tapas expanded into, as Marianne mentioned, into a new direction for a climate action network, into a startup, and also was the foundation, and it is right now the foundation on the expertise that I'm teaching as a lecturer at the Delft University of Technology here in the Netherlands, and how behavior can be influenced by friends, families, or those influencers that are coming from close networks. And in order to notch a plant-based diet by social influence or mobilization strategies like social proof, the one that we see here. Social proof, just to remind, that is a desire to conform to what others recognize us for. And the pictures that you see are some posts that we posted on Instagram. That was part of a collaboration that we do with Cornell for a plant-rich diet engaged Cornell project, where bachelor students were expanding and developing educational materials together with us, like recipes in social media, but also transmitting, communicating, and sharing the storytelling of Sustainable Tapas, which is to share family stories, multicultural food backgrounds, and intergenerational food legacies, which are also part of the story of this student, that she was sharing the stories of her grandma. She was like a second generation of Filipino immigrants, and she wanted to connect again to that gastronomy legacy by enhancing plant-based diets among her family. And that's it. Thank you so much, Marianne. And
Thank
I'm
you,
looking for
Fatima.
those questions for later.
Yeah, thank you. All right, so thanks, that was great. We're next gonna go to Annalise Eclipse, who was a student in a climate solutions course. Annalise received her BA in environmental science and sustainability with a minor in climate change from Cornell University in 2022. And now she's working at youth environmental student, excuse me, she's a youth environmental steward at the Community Nonprofit Action Network in Point Arena, California. And impressively, she's also a member of the CDC Foundation's Climate and Health Youth Council. So I think I really liked Annalise's project because not all of the drawdown climate solutions are something we can do in our daily life, like food waste or plant-rich diet, but women and family planning or education and family planning, we might have to do it differently, for example, by raising funds. So with that, I'll turn it over to Annalise.
Thank you so much, Dr. Krasny, for that introduction. So yeah, I'm Annalise, and I'm here to share a little bit about my experience organizing a fundraiser while in Dr. Krasny's Climate Solutions course. So I took this course in fall 2019. So through this class, I learned that one of Project Drawdown's climate solutions was actually educating women and girls. And this really drew my attention because there didn't seem to be an obvious connection between women's education and, greenhouse gas emissions. So according to Project Drawdown, improving women and girls' access to education could help reduce CO2 emissions by more than 50 gigatons by 2050. So giving women and girls equal access to educational opportunities has been shown to give women more agency over their future. And this includes their family size and also empowers them to be active against climate change in their own communities. So I did some more research and I found out that 62 million girls worldwide lack equal access to education, and menstrual taboos are one particular barrier that keep a lot of girls from attending school. So many girls worldwide drop out of school once they start having their periods because of shame and also lack of access to period products. So I decided to address this problem by organizing a film screening to fundraise for Femme International. So Femme International is this nonprofit which empowers women and girls in Africa to overcome taboos through menstrual health education and resources. So these resources include the Femme kits that you can see here in these pictures, and these include reusable menstrual cups or pads. So it's also sustainable as well. I chose to show the short documentary period, End of Sentence. So this is a award-winning Netflix documentary, which shares the relevant story of women in India fighting shame surrounding menstruation by producing and selling their own pads. So after showing this documentary to my classmates and to the rest of the attendees, and also leading a discussion on these issues, I encourage everyone to donate to Femme International. Could you please change the slide? Thank you. Okay, so I also put several of the social mobilization techniques that I learned in Dr. Krasny's class into action throughout this whole process. So for example, I strengthened my connection with my network by, before the fundraiser actually happened, I gave an informational presentation about women's education as a climate solution to a female empowerment club at Cornell called Girl Up. So by doing that, I was able to make myself familiar to this group of classmates and also create this connection with them so they're more likely to come to the fundraiser and help support Femme. So I also designed buttons supporting Femme. You can see right there a couple of them. I handed them out at the fundraiser, and I did this for several reasons. So first, to help encourage accountability. So the actual button says, I support Femme. So in a way, it's helping to encourage people to support Femme in their daily lives and just support Femme's mission in general. And then also, it's also to encourage reciprocal behavior through the norm of reciprocity. So basically, by giving something somebody something for free, I'm encouraging them to return the favor by supporting Femme. So overall, this network climate action was a very important learning experience for me in my college career. So because this project was a part of my climate solutions course, I was able to receive feedback and support from Dr. Krasny and my classmates throughout the whole process. And I think I really gained a real understanding and appreciation of everything that can go into organizing and planning an event like this. So that involved, creating flyers to advertise the fundraiser and placing them all around the Cornell campus, and also coming up with my own convenient online donation system. So kind of as some of the speakers have mentioned before, the idea of choice architecture. So often people will go for what's easiest. So I wanted to make sure that donating was very easy. So as you can see, I had like a QR code that people could scan with their phones and just really easily be taken to a page where they could donate. And so many of the social networking and mobilization techniques that I learned throughout this project are really incredibly relevant to the job I actually have now as a youth environmental steward. So I'm working at this local community nonprofit here in Northern California in Point Arena. It's a very small little town. And my job is to get local teens engaged in making their communities climate resilient, because we're a coastal area and we're definitely susceptible to flooding and a lot of other climate related disasters. So I think my experience fundraising for Femme has actually played a big part in preparing me for this work by teaching me how to reach people, how to encourage people to take on, climate friendly behaviors. That's all very relevant. So thank you so much for listening. And I welcome any questions you might have.
Thank you, Annalise. And we'll either have questions in the chat or get to questions at the end. But that was great. I really liked your project and I talk about it a lot. And I think Femme International is such a great organization. So our last speaker is Cami Armendariz. And Cami wasn't in one of my classes, but she did an independent study with me. And now we're switching a little bit away from network climate action towards the advocacy and the idea of, oh, if you get students involved in advocacy, what are they going to learn? Is this sort of stepping on the bounds of environmental education? Are we going too far away from our educational mission? And Cami is a second-year student in the environmental and sustainability major at Cornell with a minor in education and another minor in film. And she writes for our student newspaper, Cornell Daily Sun. And she just finished a backpacking trip in Spain. So she is going to talk about her work with this app, Climate Action Now, and how she created letters that people can easily send to Congress, their own representatives, just by a couple of clicks on their phone. And so with that, I want to turn it over to Cami.
Hi, thank you. So as Marianne said, throughout the spring semester of this past year, I worked on the Climate Action Now app through the independent study. And I found that this application made it exceptionally easy to take meaningful action on your phone in really just seconds or minutes. And I found that it, again, brought together individuals, government, businesses, and schools for a better climate and better future as the main goal. And I worked behind the scenes on the app, writing letters, otherwise known as Ask Tells, and those were letters to Congress about important pieces of legislation, and developing quizzes and articles as well for the app users to complete. So the extent of knowledge I acquired throughout this independent study was unimaginable to me, from learning and writing about lesser-known bills like the Tribal Coastal Resiliency Act to receiving emails back from senators like Chuck Schumer about my letter concerning the Manatee Protection Act, which I'll talk about a little bit later. The range of current environmental activities I could explore allowed me to discover multiple pieces of legislation that I had no idea could even make it to Congress before. And through this, I was able to obtain a much deeper understanding of how bills in the House and the Senate work, which was a topic I hadn't been exposed to in my education since a 2-week stint in elementary school, I believe. So in total, I was able to produce about 50 actions, most of which were Ask Tells, which again are the letters to Congress. And every week I found that as I was scrolling through the news or looking at current events, I would make connections between my daily activities to environmental, ecological, and social climate related topics to make content for the app so that I conduct further research. And I found that understanding how different fields of science connect is definitely crucial when trying to find solutions for climate issues. And on the coming slide, or the one we're already on, this is an example of one of the kind of distinct and cool topics I was able to learn about and share with others on the app through a letter to Congress. And so what you're seeing now is what an app user would read when first clicking into the action I wrote. And it's about changing the West Indian manatee's conservation status from threatened to endangered under the Endangered Species Act. So here I'll kind of read a brief version of what you're seeing on the right, but it just says like human-caused pollution and rising temperatures are attacking Florida waters, killing native plants and animals, significantly affecting the Florida manatee. As climate change worsens, the annual toxic algae bloom outbreak will only intensify. Therefore, manatees need to be back on the endangered species list so we can appropriately allocate resources. And after the app user would read this, they could then fill in any personalized information and send the letter directly to Congress through email, or we're making a call. And in this case, it's also going directly to Governor DeSantis. And from the Manatee Protection Act to on the next slide as well, telling state leaders to require climate education in school. The diversity of content on the app is immense, not just for me in creating content, but for the app users as well, as they're able to go through just so many just pieces of content that they can take part in. And so the culminating event of my semester working on Climate Action Now was an action party for Cornell's Lab of Ornithology. And in this scenario, an action party is a webinar that starts with a presentation by a guest speaker. And in this case, it was a speaker about bird conservation. And then it's followed by a network of people sending letters to Congress supporting related legislation. And this is all done in the app. So within this event, I learned and wrote letters concerning the Federal Bird Safe Buildings Act, reversing the seabird crisis, protecting fish species that marine birds prey on, to bills that would empower communities while saving birds from toxic pesticides. And these were all brand new topics to me, which was really neat, because the amazing thing about the app was that my work didn't solely educate me when creating the content, but then it would go out into the public domain for other people to absorb and soak in, and especially communicate towards within these action parties. So the Lab of Ornithology Action Party allowed hundreds of users to complete and learn about these bird-related matters in just minutes. So I felt like, as an educational tool, Climate Action Now really held the power to ignite a collective spark of environmental consciousness and, again, inspire that meaningful change. So I was able to share this app with my fellow peers, lots of family members, and even groups I met on the Ithaca bus system, as I was just doing that myself when I would have time. So the application really was quick and simple, as shown by other people when they would come back to me with their feedback. And my mom was also very excited to tell me when she first downloaded the app on her first day, and she did like 10 letters to Congress. She was like, "Cammy, like, I did this." And I was like, "Oh, good job. That's awesome." But again, just really, she's not too technology savvy. So it was really cool. But it's neat because everybody should have an easily accessible way to get involved and learn about the natural world around them. And this app forms a great network, I found, just because while many people can't devote their entire lives to working on climate solutions, everybody, or most everybody, has a few extra minutes throughout their day, whether standing in line or waiting for an appointment. And a lot of us do have phones or other technology available. So I found, again, the app served as the catalyst for making informed decisions, especially when you just want to learn a little extra every single day, and just kind of have your brain always flowing and obtaining new information. So empowering individuals to become informed advocates again, and encouraging them to engage with policymakers. I enjoyed all my time working with the app and developing content. So thank you so much for listening. And I highly recommend checking the app out as well.
Thank you, Cammy. That was great. And if people have questions about the app, maybe, Anne, you can put my email in the chat, because if this was such a quick overview, it might not be clear, but you can download the app for free on the App Store, on the Apple or Android. And it's pretty self-evident how it works if you want to go and do that. So we were going to do a poll, but we're running a little late. And so, and if it's okay, I just have a few closing slides, and then maybe if we have time, we can do the poll, but I wanted to wrap it up real quickly.
That sounds great, Marianne.
Okay, so just this is a slide from Pew Research, and showing that the younger generations are more active than the older generations in taking climate actions, whether it's a donation action like Annalise talked to, contacting elected officials like Cami talked about, or other actions. And then also that this is really important because of what we've been talking about with network climate actions, that many younger adults say they've been encouraged by family or friends to do more on climate, or in Tim's case and in Cami's case, it can go the other way, influencing young people, influencing older people, or influencing our peers, as in Annalise's case and Fatima's case. So this is a quote from Robert Frank, who wrote the book Under the Influence I showed earlier. And he says, when our peers take actions to preserve the planet, we're more likely to follow suit. The human instinct to conform could help us address the climate crisis. And with that, I just want to thank Anne and Judy and all your wonderful colleagues at NAE. And I'm going to turn it over to Anne for questions and answers, or a poll, or whatever you think is best to do at this point. And again, thank you to my co-presenters. It's really fun to see your enthusiasm and everything that you're doing and learning.
Thank you so much, Marianne. Let's go ahead and launch that poll. And I'm going to launch the poll and then give folks another minute or two to enter their questions into the chat for everybody.
So I should stop sharing.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll launch the poll. Folks can still see it.
Great.
So feel free and take a second to answer this question about the role of advocacy and EE.
And just as you're doing that, I think Anne put the link to an action party. We're having one tonight on the Farm Bill. We have over 500 people signed up. And what this means is you'll listen to we're going to have a panel basically talking about the Farm Bill and how important it is to climate. And then you can download the app and take actions, send letters to Congress about the Farm Bill and climate policy. And I've been on a lot of these action parties, and we usually send several thousand letters to Congress. I think the upper limit has been about 4,000. So the idea is to just kind of inundate people, our representatives, and let them know that people are really concerned about the particular issue, whether it's bird conservation or climate and farm policy.
And I shared the results, Marianne, to poll.
Is this what we're seeing, the results, or are you going to do like one of those pie charts?
Oh, you can see the results up on the screen. So right now, you have a few say that the role for advocacy and EE is there if it's coupled with learning. And then some folks said it should be part of every EE program.
That's about 57% say it should be part of every EE program, and about 43. And we didn't have anybody at either end.
Yeah, interesting.
Okay, so yes,
Mary,
that's. Go ahead, Jen.
No, I just wanted to thank all of you, but I wanted to ask you is, do you get pushback ever from educators on the advocacy question, and how do you deal with that?
Yeah, so there's a couple ways to deal with it. And I did have a conversation with Boris Simmons about this, and she had some really great insights too. So I recommend talking to her about, basically, I got pushback when I sort of talked about this. Even having students do a network climate action, I think, no, maybe it was just on the advocacy part. I got pushback from some of my Cornell faculty colleagues saying it was inappropriate. But I think about it two ways. One, there's a crisis. You don't act like normal in a crisis, right? We do things that help us to avert a crisis, right? So, and I think we're to that point. So that's the way I think about it personally for the students, and any of the students in my classes can comment, but it's optional. So like Tim wasn't on the Climate Action Now project. He did a project on construction waste in China with some Chinese colleagues. So he did a different project, right? So you have a choice. So that one was more of a research project. And I think it's important to give students a choice. And then the last thing, and I think it's really obvious from what Cami was talking about, she did about 50 actions this spring as an independent study. And just, you do learn a lot from researching what the bills are in Congress, what groups are supporting them, how bills are passed. So I think it's a huge learning experience also. So those are my 3 points. How do you think about it, Judy?
Actually, exactly the same, because we actually got a little pushback. What was I just talking about? By calling it the climate crisis or the climate emergency. Oh, it was a youth panel at EPA. They were saying that by calling it the crisis or emergency, even though it is, it stresses people out, it causes anxiety, yet at the same time, it talks about the urgency. So I think it's a balance that we're all going to have to figure out for ourselves individually and collectively. What we do personally might be a little different than what we do professionally, but we need to do what we think is right. And this is there's no issue that doesn't overlap with climate change, social, economic, environmental, and what you all are doing is so important. And Cami, you had a good question there. Do you want to throw it out for the whole panel here before we end?
Should I just send it in the chat?
Yep.
Okay, great.
Oh, I thought you were just going to tell it.
Oh, sorry, I could speak it too. Either.
Why don't you speak it so everybody can hear it, and then
Yeah.
the panel
So
can
it's-
answer, and then Annie.
It's kind of a longer question. But what strategies or approaches have you found most effective when incorporating this technology into your environmental education programs, really to include all people of all diverse backgrounds? So.
And Cami, that's a really good question too for the app. Who's using it? How do you measure it? What kind of backgrounds? Just a lot of interesting thinking about how to use technology and be inclusive. Marianne, Tim, Annalise, Fatima, Anne, any ideas? Rachel?
Fatima, were you talking? I couldn't tell, but you're muted. I'm not going to answer a question because, like, you could see when I tried to deal with Tim's video that I'm techno not that confident. And so, but the app is, I'm also a content creator like Cami is. And I've been specializing in the farm bill because it's huge. They're saying it might be over $1 trillion now. It's bigger than the IRA in any case. It has huge climate impacts because it's going to be reauthorized for 5 years. And so I've created, I think, over 150 actions related to farm policy on the app that people can send. And I can at least do that much. And because in addition to those letters that Cami showed, there's a why section where you say, oh, why is this important, and give an explanation. It can be used as an educational tool for the user too. In other words, they can just click and it goes to their senator or their representative, or they can choose to read more in depth and they can look at the references or sources you used and so forth. So I think it has the potential for being a really cool educational tool at a lot of levels.
Thanks, Marianne. Anne, do you want to wrap it up? A big thank you to all of you, and we'll stay after if anybody has questions. You all were fantastic. So Anne, do you want to close us out? Thank you.
Yes, thank you all. Thank you, Marianne, Camille, and Elise, and all of you for joining us today. Such wonderful topics and creative ways to combat the climate crisis. Very, very cool. And I wanted to just take the last couple of minutes here, closing us out, how we do it every time, and sending you off with a reminder that everyone will be getting the webinar recording, the webinar notes, as well as the slides that Marianne shared earlier. Will be sent directly to your inbox before the end of the week. And I am going to end with 2 more announcements related to conferences that we have coming up before the end of the year. The first one is our Natural Start Conference. That's our conference for anyone that is curious and interested about early childhood education, and registration is now open. And you've got some really incredible speakers already lined up. Everything is going to be online, and with your conference registration, you'll have access to all the recordings for a full year. One more conference coming up is our very own NAAE annual conference. Registration just opened up. And starting October 9th, we'll have workshops, meetings, we'll have the research symposium, as well as the regular conference. And I think you'll be really excited to learn about the inspiring and thoughtful speakers we have in store for you, including the literary talents of Ross Gay and Amy Nizuku Matatiel. They're going to be kicking us off opening night on Tuesday, October 17th. Head to our website to learn more about all of our speakers and to register. And that is all. Again, thanks for everybody for joining us today. Marianne, Camille, Annalise, Fatima, Tim, it was so wonderful to hear from all of you. I'm going to be sharing all of those links and resources and include them in the webinar notes. So not to worry, if you didn't jot them all down, you'll get them at the end of the week. Thanks again, everybody. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.